Okay guys, here we are on practical number 3, the vertebrae, or the vertebral column. So it's simple and it seems to be repetitive, and it is. So I'm going to start with just showing you the different vertebrae. So what you're looking at on the left is the C1, or what we call the atlas. On the right is the axis, and I'm going to go through the different parts of it. But these are cervical vertebrae. And the reason why they're cervical vertebrae is because of these holes right here, and these are foramen. I'll explain them in a minute. But these holes allow for our cranial nerves to enter. Okay, so there are 12, and there are 12 cranial nerves, which we'll study next semester. Those are special because these are on top of each other, and these allow your head to turn. And basically on this little tiny thing called the dens is what your head turns on. It's pretty incredible. This is one of the other of the 7 cervical vertebrae. You can also see those little holes. They're called transverse foramen. This is another cervical vertebrae. So these are all cervical vertebrae, but these just have special names. C1 is the atlas, C2 is the axis. This is a thoracic vertebra. A thoracic vertebra is such because it has the facet here for the attachment of the ribs. Your ribs do not attach at the sternum, they attach at your vertebrae. There are 12 of these, there are 12 ribs. So you should see these. This is what makes a thoracic vertebra a thoracic vertebra. This guy right here is a lumbar vertebra. Does not have any of the other characteristics. Basically, the characteristic of a thoracic vertebra is this really thick body. This is where the bottom of your spine, where you're going to absorb the most shock from a lot of things that you do throughout your life. This is the sacrum. You already learned that in the full skeleton if you did that already. What's not shown here is the coccyx, or your tailbone. Let's go through the basics of let's just go down the list. Okay, so remember, this is a regular cervical vertebra. So we're going to look at just the regular one. Remember, this is the atlas, this is the axis. So we're just going to go to maybe C3 or C4. I'm not really sure which one this is, but this is not one of the first 2. So what you're going to look at is right here, we have what are called transverse foramen. Transverse, one on each side. This is going to allow for the left and right, whatever cranial nerve goes through here. Transverse process. A process is something that sticks out. So these are going to be the transverse processes. Spinous process, this is going to be what sticks out on your back. Spinous process. Vertebral foramen. This is where your spinal cord is going to go through. So this is the vertebral foramen of a cervical vertebra. Remember, these are stacked on top of each other, so these are going to be facets that are going to attach or articulate with the one above it. So these are going to be our superior articulating facets of this cervical vertebra. If I turn it upside down, there are facets on the bottom. These are going to be the inferior articulating facets of the cervical vertebra. Okay. Now let's go to the next thing on your list is the atlas, and I've already shown you the atlas. It's very, very unique. These are going to be the superior articulating facets of the axis, the atlas. If I turn it upside down, these are going to be the inferior articulating facets of the atlas. There's also transverse foramen here. There's one, there's the other one. Then you have the vertebral foramen of the axis. I keep saying axis. This is the atlas. Sorry, guys. This is the atlas. Atlas, atlas. The axis. If you get the card that says axis, you're going to have to pick it. You're going to have to show me. You know this is the axis. So these are the superior articulating facets of the axis. Turn it upside down. These are the inferior articulating facets of the axis. This also has transverse processes. Here's one. They're tiny. Here's the other one. Then we have the transverse foramen. of the axis, and then we have the vertebral foramen of the axis. Again, this might not be in order on your sheet, but I'm covering everything on your sheet. So that does it for cervical. Let's go to the thoracic vertebra. So it's going to be repetitive, right? So they're going to stack on top of one another as well. So this one is going to have its superior articulating facets like this. So that's these. If I turn it upside down, these two guys right here are going to be the inferior articulating facets of a thoracic vertebra. These transverse processes are obnoxious. Here's one, here's the other. Transverse. This would be a thoracic vertebra, right? Here's the spinous process, right here. You might get the card that says facet for the tubercle of the rib on a thoracic vertebrae. There's that facet I was telling you about. That's where there's a tubercle on each rib, a little bump that is going to articulate with each of your thoracic vertebrae. There's one on this side, there's one on this side. Okay? Lumbar vertebra, this big guy right here. Here's the body of the lumbar vertebra. Here are the transverse processes. You see how repetitive we are? It's just a different vertebra. Here's the transverse processes. Here's the spinous process. Notice there's no foramen other than for the spinal cord to go through. This is the vertebral foramen. The only transverse foramen are on cervical vertebra. So that's it for the lumbar. There's not much other than saying it's a big thick guy. Here's your sacrum. So you might get the card that says sacrum. Point to it. Okay. Superior articulating facets are right here. So the very last L5 vertebra, the last lumbar vertebra, is going to articulate with your sacrum right here. Here's one superior facet, here's another one. You'll notice they're smooth. The median sacral crest, remember all those terms we learned, they're going to come back to haunt you if you don't know them, so you need to study them. Median, right down the middle, sacral crest. The sacral foramina are the holes. And then, of course, what's missing is the coccyx. So if you get that card, you're just going to say it would be right here. Or you can point to it on the full skeleton. And that's it.